Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing in Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. In this episode, I'm joined by the wonderful Dr. Nona Djavid for the second time, and we have an inspiring and introspective conversation about living an authentic life, breaking free from the matrix, the societal expectations that are imposed on us by family, our teachers, our preachers, the media, pretty much everything around us. We delve into the powerful be, do, have model, and we talk about the importance of clear vision and the transformative role that identity has in shaping our behaviour. We also explore the importance of surrendering to one's life vision, shedding old identities and embracing the new you and evolution. Nona also shares her insights around the concept that you can only experience what you've experienced before. She emphasises the importance, the need for things like mental rehearsal if we want to step into a new life. So, without any further ado, let's jump into this eye-opening discussion filled with some practical wisdom to empower you on your journey towards personal and professional identity. See you in there. Nona, welcome back to the Marketing in Practice podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me back.
Well, I'm very excited about our chat today. We've had numerous now, and I've been wanting to get back on and chat with you of recent. I've been loving so much of the content that you've been sharing on your socials. And I want to start with this. On a post recently, you had a quote there that mentioned exiting the matrix and creating your own reality. We're going to just dive straight into it. What did you mean by that?
Oh gosh. I have a feeling this episode is going to get personal.
Let's do it.
So, I think that there's so many different directions I can go with that question. The matrix, as you would think, just that phrase in itself, like exiting the matrix or what is the matrix, there's so many different directions I can take that, but I'm going to make it super practical and super personal, probably things I haven't shared before, and also um from a personal experience, what I meant by exiting the matrix. I grew up, I may have shared this on the last episode, but I grew up in Iran.
Mhm.
So I grew up in a third world country. The culture, the Persian culture is very strong, as it is in many places in the world. And there are things that you are taught to do, or there are ways that you should be doing things, just like anywhere in the world. Like they'll tell you, okay, first you go to school and then you get married and then you have kids and then you go to you go to university in between those, and all of those things that you should be doing. And I remember when I was a kid questioning the societal norms, like the things that you're supposed to be doing, the pressure that there is to do things a certain way, especially for a woman from the Middle East with very little freedom, actual freedom in the country, but then also in the structure of the family, and their expectations of women everywhere in the world. It's just, it seems to be heavier in the Middle Eastern culture.
Mm.
So growing up in that kind of an environment, and while my parents raised me to be super independent and think independently and all of those things, you cannot ignore the way that the world shapes the decisions that we are making. Now, on top of it, you have the patterns, right? Like the patterns of thoughts and behavior and habits and belief systems that sometimes were passed on by ancestors, right? Like ancestral trauma that gets passed on, or belief systems that gets passed on. And sometimes it's things I learned and picked up directly from my parents, around scarcity, or around, really, like it could be anything. Just the belief systems, the thoughts, the way that you do things. And then sometimes there were things that I picked up from the kids at the playground, or sometimes these things that I've picked up, or anybody has picked up, these patterns of thoughts that have nothing to do with our relatives or our teachers, our parents, caregivers. They have to do with something that we heard and all of a sudden we make it ours, and we're not aware of when all of these things happen. So I believe that combination of all of those things, whether it's things we picked up from our caregivers, like solid belief systems that they literally teach us and pass on, things that are indirectly passed on to us, ancestral, and then societal, and then the community, and then the culture. And then I moved to the United States, and then there's a whole set of new rules, societal rules. And all of those things sort of structure the way that your life will go. And, you can kind of deviate from that a bit here and there. Like I was, expected to go to medical route. I went to chiropractic. I became a chiropractor. You're expected to like have a job and create a family and make good money. And so I deviated from that. I was like, I want to start my own business right out of school. So deviated from it a bit, but I was never really, while I was taught to think independently, I didn't have the tools. And I don't know that a lot of us have these tools at a young age to determine what is ours, truly our soul's purpose. What is it that is authentic to me? What is it that I want to create? Without all these borrowed ideas and thoughts and belief systems. It kind of takes this nakedness, this rawness of sitting down with yourself and determining, like, wait a second, which one of these pieces do I want to keep? And, I'll be honest with you, Angus, it was like when I say I exited the matrix, quote unquote, it was more so having to let go and drop so many of not just expectations, but people, events, things off of my to-do list, businesses that I sold. I almost felt like I got to a point in my life where I had to blow up everything.
Mm.
And I didn't blow up everything. I did it very thoughtfully and intentionally, but that's the best way I could describe it. And for me, that was exiting the matrix, really starting to evaluate what belongs to me, what's my soul purpose, and what is a borrowed opinion or borrowed dream even, or borrowed thought process. And that's really been an interesting journey in the past really decade of my life, trying to unlearn and unload all of those things that are not mine. But they never were mine.
I wonder, as you're going through it, thinking about the matrix, whether or not, is it just living life based on other people's expectations, other people's rules, as opposed to saying, no, I'm actually now going to live the life that I authentically want to live?
For me, it could mean that. But when you say the matrix, like we can go down the rabbit hole of what the media portrays, what the school system, what the education system brings about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, like I have this dream for my kids where I want to take them out of school. I want to world school them. And I don't, and this might sound controversial, but like I don't believe in the public and or systematic way that education is going, or the routes that those things are going. So the matrix, to me, from a practical perspective, not from like the Matrix the movie perspective, but from a practical perspective, we're bombarded with all this input that is meant to kind of keep you in line and give you a structure to be a worker bee, practically. Where no one stops and questions what's outside of the box. What is it that I actually want to create and express out into the world, which I believe we're here to do. We're all creators. And for me, that was a big gap. And it was almost like I woke up, and while this journey has been going on for the past 10 years, I think that it had something to do with turning 40. I don't know if you want to call it midlife crisis, but like I've heard this a lot, where for women turning 40, this started to kind of accelerate this process towards like my late 30s, I guess. Where, I was like kind of being like, all right, like, what am I doing? What do I want? What do I really want to experience?
Yes. Yeah. When I think about living life based on others' expectations, that others is so pervasive because it is media, school, and it is people close to us. And it is things that are so incredibly subtle that we don't see them. And I think that's the subtle ones that are the most powerful, because we can see some, and at least we can be in some form of choice with regards to that too. But the things that are subtle, we the belief systems, the stories we tell ourselves. So tell me about getting out of it. And you kind of start on that moment that there was perhaps a catalyzing event there, that, let's just say, for instance, that it was, heading towards 40. Where do you begin this journey? Because if there is a pulling, which I know there is for many of our listeners, that they're like, okay, but there's also like, oh, so where do you begin?
Gosh, for me personally, I think it seems like it was overnight. Um, like people that see me now or see me on social media, or people who've known me for a while, and they feel like, I don't know you anymore. You're a completely different version of yourself. And they
Yes.
think that I quote unquote blew up my life and now I have this whole different kind of life, and I'm a completely different person. It seemed like it happened overnight, but it really wasn't overnight. It was a process of just being completely unhappy and seeing and sitting in the unhappiness. I remember telling my now ex-husband that I feel like I'm dying inside. I feel like there's more that I want to discover, and there's more that I want to do, and I feel that I'm unable to do that. I mean, I was like in a really dark place. There was
Ah,
no one thing that led to that. It wasn't like, oh, this one thing happened and then overnight. No, it was like going down this dark hole and getting to the very bottom of it, and then realizing, okay, I've got to climb this up. And before I climb up, I've got to determine what is mine. What is, which parts of this I want to keep and which parts of these I want to get rid of. And that was really the beginning of everything. It was like, okay, part of that process, I sold my practice. It was like, I had a very successful practice. It seemed insane to walk away from it because it was generating money. And when you sell your practice, yes, it's a great deal because you get a chunk of money, but then what? You don't have any income, and now you have to start all over again, or you have, you know what I'm saying? So it wasn't the easiest thing that I did, but it was one of those things where I had to let go of. And so I had to transition identities from the chiropractor to the consultant to the human being who just wants to kind of live life and allow my life to be the message. And I'm still going through that. I'm still learning in this process, but I have gone through so many different identities. I have recreated myself since really like in the past decade, but more so in the past, I would say 4 or 5 years, over and over again. And I've done that intentionally.
mm,
And I've literally created, now I've done it so many times, mastered this so much. And I don't say this lightly, uh, because I was seeking something that felt real. I was seeking something that was absolutely mine. And it didn't start that way. It started
mm.
out when I was in the dark place, it was like, oh, what do you want? Guess what it started with? All the borrowed things, borrowed dreams. It was like, I want this kind of house. I want this kind of car. I want to live here. I want to do that. And I started there.
Mm.
And then slowly I ripped it apart. It was like, no, that's not what I want. What did I want when I was a child before everybody told me what I should want? What was I into? What were my interests prior to the world telling me what my interests should be? And so, reevaluating, continuous reevaluating all of that. And then ultimately, now I feel like I'm just having a sense of uh, who I am and where I'm headed.
I'm I'm fascinated by identity, and I know for me, I had this realization because I wanted to exit my practice about 5 years before I actually ended up doing it. It took me that long, and I couldn't work out why. There's all these logical reasons why I should doing it. And it wasn't until I came across the realization that it was an identity issue, that chiropractic was not something that I did. It literally was who I was. And that's kind of what helped me be successful. I'd stood up on stages and I talked about living and being a chiropractor. I'd been president of local, associations, all those kind of things. And I went, so this is my identity of who I see myself as. And if I leave this, who can I be? And that's why it felt like a betrayal to me. So egotistical when I think about it. Because of course there's other people that can look after my patients as well, if not better. I mean, my mind was starting to transition out of there, so there was going to be somebody else there too. But this, I'm interested because you've said that multiple times through there you went from chiropractor to consultant to human being. Can you talk a little bit about the work that when you're talking with people about the power of identity, and then how do we redefine one, and then what are the processes that you're going through with that at the moment?
Yeah, that's really good. So, you have this whole idea of, and I know you have heard of this, but be, do, have, right?
Yes.
So, and I think it was popularized by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I'm sure all of your audience have heard of it one way or another, even inside
a really brief little summary of what be, do, have is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So be, do, have is like, okay, generally speaking, in our society, technically people are like, I want to have this, so I'm going to do all of these things to get to the things that I want to have, right? Like, okay, I want this kind of practice, or I want this kind of car, or I wanted this kind of experience. So I'm going to make a to-do list of all the things I got to do, strategy, marketing, all the things, and work towards that to have that. However, be, do, have says that you have to start with who you are being. Okay. So which is who your identity is. And if you think about this and break this down, well, your identity drives your behavior, right? I don't know about you, but you're probably that fit friend, but I have a really fit friend. Okay. Her name is Alani. She literally just goes to the gym like every day. She doesn't have to think about it, or maybe 3-4 times a week. She just doesn't have to think about it. She doesn't have to put it on her calendar. Her and I set goals in January and write out our resolutions together. We've been best friends forever. And I'll write down, I'll be like, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. I'm going to eat healthy. And that she doesn't even write about any of those things. It's not even part of her thought process. It's just who she is being, right? She identifies with a fit person. And I identify with a healthy person, so I eat healthy, but I don't identify with a fit person. So I have a hard time going to the gym regularly. So that's kind of the idea, is your identity drives your behavior. If you identify with being a super successful entrepreneur, then you probably take risks. You probably take action really quickly. You probably are confident in what you're doing. You're okay if you fail. And on the other hand, if you are, you identify with the person who cannot run a business, then you probably are going to struggle, because you're not going to do the things that it takes to be able to have the things, right? So it always starts with identity. However, I have found that, while I've studied this a lot, and there are a lot of like workshops around, okay, so who am I being? And your being should be abundant and grateful and all the things, so that you can have the things, and, in that order. However, I find with working with so many different people around these concepts of identity and helping them determining where is it that they want to go, what's their vision, is that most people don't really know who the identity should be, right? So they're like, okay, I have an idea of this next level life that I want to create for myself. And this is legitimately, these are the steps that I took and I've taken multiple times, and I've actually systematized them and figured out the steps that it takes. And I teach this inside of my membership. And I'm going to share this with you and your audience here. But you have to start with what your vision is. Like, you have to know where you are going, what kind of life you want to create. And I call this an elevated life script, right? So you sit down, and I teach my people here, and I've done this myself multiple times. You sit down and you write out the script for the ideal life that you want to have. Could also work for your business, right? And this is different than goals. The goals is like, okay, I'm going to write the goals. I'm going to do the things that get me there. The idea with the life vision is that, you know, if you've studied Neville Goddard, I know you have, Neville Goddard's work.
No, I don't know Neville.
No, okay. I thought maybe I had the conversation, but he talks about this idea of wish fulfilled.
Yes.
Okay. So if I said, Angus, what's your dream life like? And if you were to write it out, I would say, please write it out as if it's already fulfilled. It's already done.
Yes.
Okay. So you're writing out all the things, and there are elements that go into that life vision or into that business vision. So, for example, one of them is like expansive statements. For me, it's like, if I'm talking about my home, it's not important that my house has a beach view, but it is important that, you know, the statement of love lives here, right? To me, it brings up the feeling that my children are happy, they are laughing, that their friends are over, everybody's nurtured, my house always clean, you know, all of these things. So there are these criteria that go into the life vision. I don't want to get off tangent, but the idea is you start with the vision of what you want to create. And when I was referring at the beginning of the conversation, I said I wanted the house and the car and the things. Slowly, I started to strip those off and be like, okay, what is it really that I like to experience, right? And then I started to write those down. It could be people you want to experience. It could be wealth or lifestyle. It could be events, experiences, feelings. I wanted to feel deeply connected to people. I wanted to have experienced freedom, what it's like to not have to work, you know, and do exactly what I love to do, like have this conversation with you and build a life around the things that I just love doing naturally. So that was the idea that wasn't the idea I started with, but ultimately was, you know, it evolved over time. But so going back to the topic, starting with the life vision, and then based on that life vision, you go, oh, if this is the vision I have for my life, then who do I need to be? Okay. If you don't have a crystal clear vision for where you are going, you will not be able to identify the identity of the version of you that has access to that lifestyle. And that lifestyle, I want to be very clear when I tell people, hey, write out the identity of the version of you that's already living in this lifestyle, like a parallel life. Okay. So if this is a parallel life, the version of you that is a successful entrepreneur, you know, a happy mom, happy children, happy life, all the things that you want. And yes, the materialistic things too. Well, that version of you comes with an identity. Who is this individual? Start to describe this individual, just like I gave some examples earlier, but starting to describe this individual and come up with the identity. But I want to be very, very clear. I don't want anybody to be mistaken with, oh, so I should pretend to be this next level version of myself, right? So I want to clear that up. You're actually, if this is real, if the vision is real, if that's a desire that you have, what you are doing, you're not pretending, you're surrendering to the desire. You're surrendering to the seed of desire that's actually in your heart. And if that is a desire of yours and you have the ability to surrender, all you need to do is let go of what you are not, or who you are not. In reality, you're actually letting go of the limiting beliefs and the blockages that are holding you back. So you're not pretending, you're actually becoming more of who you are and who you are meant to be. And that desire is there for a reason, and it varies for every single person. Your life script is going to look totally different than mine, and yours might look like complete chaos if I were to live in it. Mine is, you know, might look like complete disaster for you, but there's a reason for that. as human beings, we're coming in to express those. So be, do, have with a little modification. Listen, come up with your idea of your life, what you want to experience, and then identify the version of you that has access to that life right now. And then do, which is inspired action. And the have is just easy. The have is just the physical manifestation of everything that you've already done.
I've got a client at the moment who I'm working with who's having some difficulty clarifying her vision, in that, do I want to stay in, runs a great practice, multiple staff, but also has this calling for simplicity in terms of wanting to be home with a mum as a mum at this stage of their life, and oscillates back and forwards between the two of these. And therein lies some of the challenge, is that there's no clarity in the vision. And I find this a lot with people, whether it be even something as simple as goal setting or what do you want of your life, is that there seems to be a lot of challenge around people getting clarity. How do you, what advice do you have for people that are struggling for clarity?
Yeah. That's very, very common. There was an interview with Oprah where somebody asked her, they said, you interview so many people. Some of the most successful people in the world are interviewed by Oprah. And they asked her to say, what do all of these people have in common? And she said that the number one thing, hands down, that every single one of these successful people has in common is that they know exactly what they want. So they have that clarity. And I think this is why I think most people are lost, whether they know it or not. I find that sometimes people are lost in the doing of things, which those people tend to burn out in the process, get really tired. They're usually really successful, but they get tired and they burn out, or they have a health problem down the road. Or people are just lost. Like, I don't know what I want. I don't know. And sometimes we get wrapped up in the identity of, I don't know. And so I've asked, sometimes I'll ask people that I used to work with. I don't work privately anymore as much, but I would ask them, I would say, what if you did know, or what parts of it do you know for a fact? And then the other piece of it is, sometimes we're confused because we think if we let go of one, we have to let go of one to have the other, and we're not prepared to let go of one. Like what you're describing, I relate to, right? So it's like, okay, well, I want to have a profitable business, but I also want so much freedom. And that seems so outside the box, because I don't know a model who's done that. I don't know who is living the kind of life, especially like as I've moved through the things, I don't know anybody who's created this kind of life. So I feel that logically, from a left brain perspective, I've got to let go. I've got to sell the practice in order to do this, right? And sometimes the answer lies in the middle. It's not always black and white. I got to sell the practice, or I got to X, Y, and Z with the practice in order to have this. Sometimes you got to ask yourself, how can I, not can I, but how can I have my cake and eat it too? How can I create something, a world in which I have access to literally all the things that I want? I have freedom, spend time with my kids, go on vacation, run a practice, and then that becomes the vision.
I wonder in it too, because I know sometimes when I'm talking to people about this, the difficulty they have with making a decision, getting clarity in around it, is they don't, first of all, believe that it's possible.
Totally.
So therefore you have to kind of let go of more of the matrix that we started with, other people's opinions kind of in around it too. Another mental model that I really like that's helpful in this situation too is saying, well, if we've got these two scenarios, let's just paint them both out to their best possible outcome. Because there's a mental model that most of us have when we're making decisions, that there's a right decision and a wrong decision, but that's just a mental model. Like, what if both decisions were right? So what if holding on to the practice was outrageously successful? And what if staying home as a mum was outrageously successful? So both of them were dream scenarios. Which one would you take then? And sometimes that can give clarity in around it also. the other thing I think about, and even listening to you before, that because you went from coach to consultant to human being, like the way my business is at the moment is nothing like what I thought was going to be, even 12 months ago. I'm continuing. So I didn't know, like I had a direction to go in. And I went to it with absolute clarity and passion. But along the way, I'm totally okay with changing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I ask to clients when they say this is, are you okay with the reason? That's all that matters. So like you were all set for being this now you're being this. And I go, yeah, well, I found something better. Like, and there's times that I change my mind because I'm arguing for the lack. In which case, I don't like that at all. Like, I'm like, you can't do this, too hard. It's this, it's that kind of stuff there too. Those I'll push back on clients. I'm like, no, that's just a story. But when we change our mind because we're inspired, and this is one of the things I'm fascinated by is often if I'm having a coaching session, I start off and I ask a question like, what would your life, I often go 3 years. It's a kind of, I like 3 years, 12 months is too much. 5 years can be hard for people, 10 years. But I'm like, if we go 3 years, what would you like it to look like? And then I listen to people talk. And it amazes me, to this day, no two people have ever said the same thing. Like and so I remember Tony Robbins talking about desire. And he mentioned that word before. And I fucking love the word desire because he talks about it being of the Father or of the stars. It can literally come from there too. And when we have a desire that comes through us, it's a calling. Like there's no, like as I said, there's no, some people want to write books and other people want to have multiple practices and other people want this and that. If that's where your heart's desire is, then listen to it. That's where, and that's to begin. And what I've often found is that my desires are stepping stones. I'm like, okay, it's going to pull me in this direction first, and then I'll go back this way. And to so these are all things I kind of think about, as I move into it too. And I love that idea of, vision into who do I need to be, into inspired action as we move forwards there too. It's
That's good. Can I touch on something you said?
please.
This idea of possibility. Okay. So you are so right in that it stops people, and it stops myself, of what if it was possible? And what if it was easy? What if it was fun? Because most of the time we're saying, oh, it's too hard. Like we just make statements, or, oh, that sounds like it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. But this idea of possibility, and why this is so important. Well, here's what I have learned. I've learned that, I'll use this very simple, practical example that we can all relate to, not personally, but maybe we know somebody in our circle, especially when we were younger, right? So you probably know someone or knew someone when we were in the dating world, right? And they would, like, I have girlfriends that still to this day do this. They'll date the same person that just looks different. Like their entire behaviors the same sort of toxic relationship that they get into over and over and over again. And while I'm not a psychologist, we can all probably agree that it had something to do with the way that their caregivers took care of them, right? So these patterns that we run, and the reason that we run them over and over again is because they're familiar, right? So I always say this, I say, you will only experience what you have experienced. So if you've experienced success at $1 million level, say you ran $1 million practice, if you told me, Nona, start a practice from scratch here and build it to $1 million practice, I'd be like, easy, no problem, I can do that, right? Because I've already done it. And if I go a little bit higher, if you say, oh, maybe 2.2 million or something like that, be like, okay, I know how to do X, which is like $1 million practice. I can figure out how to double that, right? But if you told me create something that's going to generate 100 million, then I got nothing, right? So you can only experience what you have experienced, either through the experiences of other people or through your own experiences. You can only experience the depth of connection with your partner that you can experience or have experienced with yourself or with your caregivers as a child. So all of those things relate to what you are about to create or manifest into your life. Now, the idea of the life vision, when you dream these possibilities that might seem like totally outside of the comfort zone, totally outside of the box, like just completely nuts, right? When you come up with those ideas and you write them down, and then you do a mental rehearsal of that life vision, and you repeat that in your mind, whether it's through reading it or listening to it or creating a mind movie or whatever. Mm-hmm. Now your mind, your consciousness has experienced it over and over and over again, depending on how repetitive you've been and how obsessed you are about your life script. Now your body, your neurology, and your brain has actually, and your consciousness has experienced that life vision that you wrote out. And that mental rehearsal now prepares you for saying, for first of all, for opportunities and experiences to show up that belong to that level of life, or I call it that frequency of life. So not only do they show up in your life, but you are aware of them. Just like when I tell you, hey, yellow Lamborghini, and you're like, oh, I haven't seen one in a while. And then you walk out and you see one, right? Mm-hmm. Why? Because now you've had the mental rehearsal of it. Obviously that's a more simple idea. So you create possibility by first getting clarity around what the possibility might look like. And I tell you, become childlike when you do that. And then when you mentally rehearse it, that possibility is so much closer.
Yes, I love that. A couple of years ago, I learned the power of bridging statements in that process. Because sometimes if I'm like, I'm creating a multi-million-dollar business, and if I'm to check in with myself and go, what's your believability on that? I'm like, I don't know, 6, 7, there too. I'm like, okay, we've got to get believability 8 and above there too. But when I say to people this, let's use a bridging statement that changes to this. I'm learning that I can have a multi-million-dollar practice. What's your believability? And I'll go 10. I'm open to the idea. And sometimes that transition statement in there can then start to align stuff as well. And that mental rehearsal, rehearse, where they can then all of a sudden just step into it. It's so powerful. I love that you can only experience what you've experienced beforehand. And then that there are different, it's taken me so long. I'm just listening to Think and Grow Rich. It's one of those books that people talk about. And I'm like, I really should listen to this. There are a lot of people that and I'm loving it so much. One of the things that's spinning me out from it, there was a little example at the start there where he talks about Beethoven. And for this latter half of Beethoven's work, he was deaf. So I can't stop thinking about, he's one of the world's greatest composers who couldn't hear. And at that moment, I literally laughed out loud. I'm like, what are my excuses? Because they're not as good as that. Like, regardless of, I've got some good excuses, but none of them are close to, I'm deaf, but yet I'm still going to be one of the greatest composers that ever lives. And he just goes through time after time of, Henry Ford, 6 years of education, Thomas Edison, 3 years of education. Regardless of the barriers, so we go, I create this vision, and then what's naturally going to come up is all of these barriers that will prevent you to get there. I promise none of them are as, like, whatever they are, somebody else has overcome. And it's such an exciting game. And inside of that too, I think there has to be other identities that we take on that says, because honestly, it's probably going to be difficult, but that doesn't mean it can't be fun. There's no reason that difficult and fun can't go together. And I think we have to create these things too, because I can get quite Pollyanna and thinking that, I'm going to sit here, vision, I'm going to work towards it, it'll all be easy and the path will be there and it'll be just surrender. Like, no, there'll be some real blood, sweat and tears in there, but they can be fun too. So yeah, I love that. You're going to experience what you've experienced in the past there too. So tell me what you're thinking about possibility at the moment, and how are you continuing to open up into what's next for you?
So much of what I had put in my, elevated life vision back, say even like 3-4 years ago, I am living that life. Like, I guarantee if I went and I re-listened, which I hope that people are, intrigued enough to go back and listen maybe to the episode that you and I did. I forgot when, months ago, maybe a year ago or so.
I think it would be at least 12 months ago.
At least 12 months ago. Yeah. So check that out too, because I am a completely different person through this process. I've let so many different parts of me die and recreated the version of me that's sitting here and having this conversation with Angus. So I have really big dreams, but I think, to put it really simply, and a lot of it I have done, and I'm really, really getting comfortable with like the clarity of where I'm going next. But without boring everyone with all my dreams and ambitions, I will say this. When I said I went from the chiropractor to the consultant to, the realizing, like, just wanting to outlive my soul's purpose, like, as a human being, not as any identity, while I embrace all of my identities at the same time, that process has brought me to the space of, I just want to do the things that bring me absolute joy. Like, this conversation is so juicy for me. If I could just have conversations like this, if I can teach people, whether it's in my Elevate Club or it's speaking on stages, it doesn't matter where it is, be at the grocery store. But if I can just continue to have these conversations and I can teach the things that I'm learning and doing, I want that to be my life. And I also want that to be magically profitable. Yes. I want that. And so it doesn't need to be, oh, I can have this if I have to let go of all of that. No, I want all the abundance in the world. At the same time, I want all the freedom in the world. And at the same time, I want my life to be my message. I want to live my life exactly as I'm doing. And I want it to be my work, my piece of my work, in which it hopefully creates a dent in the universe, if not in the universe, in the lives of the people that are, in my tribe.
What, if some of our listeners are wanting to kind of check out Elevate, what will they learn? What will they experience inside of Elevate?
That's a great question. They'll experience a lot of what we talked about today, except in more of a methodical, like practical, bite-sized, obviously weekly lessons. So, for example, I have trainings just on this elevated life vision on how do you write it? What are the elements that go in there? I have trainings on, there are 3 kinds of life goals or life visions you can have: the kinds that you are able to do, the kinds that you think you can do, and the kinds that are totally outside the box. And how do you find those things? And then the different kinds of actions that you could be taking that will take you there. So it's a lot of, I would say, mindset, soul-centered, heart-centered, but also super practical on weekly basis that I teach. And then I also do group coaching around those concepts once a month inside of the group, because I want people to be able to integrate the things that they're learning. So I give you a topic to think about, and then we talk about it inside of the group. And then you're like, you know what, I did this, and then this is how it turned out, or here's a question that I have. So I do once a month, I do the coaching calls. I love doing those, and weekly sessions. And then we do quarterly workshops around 3 areas: wealth, health, and area of connection.
Yeah, love it. I've got a whole bunch of questions in around wealth that we'll get to in part 3. So I'll make sure that I have links in the show notes for everybody for where you can check out Nona. At the very least, please follow her on socials, because you're going to get a tremendous amount of value there. And if you're so inclined and your heart is calling, and then check out Elevate. I hear people just raving about it, and what I just see of you, Nona, is so inspiring. So thank you for joining me today. And I do look forward to a round 3 where we can jump into all the questions that I wanted to talk about in money, but we'll save that for another time there too. So thanks for being you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Pleasure. Talk soon. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group coaching program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.